there was also the other lesson in there of, hey, you can pay professionals to do certain work. They do it a lot quicker than you. They probably do a better job than you, and you get all of your time back. And I think one of the things that people don't do with investing is they value their own time.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how and where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute and every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You will hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Hi, freedom fighters. Are you fit? Do you work out daily and have a regular exercise regime that ensures that you have the strength and resilience to go the distance and enjoy a long and healthy quality of life? Or do you start out with good intentions, but the pressures and urgencies of life get in the way, and before you know it, the only signs of your gym membership are the monthly debit on your credit card? And what about your property investment? Are you property fit with a similar dedicated plan and process supported by daily disciplines? Or are you more of a slap-happy occasional part-time investor that fits things in around the demands of your work and your family commitments? Being property fit is a good description of what it takes to be a successful investor. And it also happens to be the title of today's special guest, Luke Harris's second book. Now, one of the things I'd love to do here on Get Invested is to dig into our guests' past and unpack their own investment journeys to uncover what they've done, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what they've learned, and how has this impacted on what they're now doing today. And today's special guest is a great example of exactly this. He's an active investor who, like yours truly, has made a lot of investment mistakes along the way, but these have become the greatest source of learning and improvement that has ultimately been documented in books that you can learn from. And this is a key point because many investors make a mistake and then, rather than learning from it, they throw their hands up in the air at the first problem or issue and then walk away from investing and write it off as a bad thing, rather than heed the lesson and become a better investor as a result of it. So to get you in the mood, let me share a brief modified extract from chapter 2 of Luke's second book, Property Fit, that actually recaps key elements of his first book, Let's Get Real, on why most investors fail. All day, people tell me, I have my goals documented. I know my dreams, dates, and dollars, as Luke outlined in his first book. But what properties should I be looking at? How do I know what to do next? What I'm actually hearing is that investors want to try to fast track the process. They want to go from A to Z without doing B, C, D, E, and all the other steps. People come in and say, oh, I've got $100,000 in equity and I want to be a developer. Or I've done this course to do flips and wraps and whatever other strategies are out there. Or I'm 58 years old and I've done a course in renovations and that's what I want to do. I don't even own a hammer, but that's what I want to do. Hold up. There are a lot of people who think they've got a silver bullet for property success. It reminds me of when I was starting out and I felt that people needed someone to put all these ideas into context. They're reading pages and pages of literature about it and watching investors on television talk up the market and then trying to find out what suits them, all the while getting sucked in by spruikers. Of course, there are lots of weird and wonderful tactics out there for people to try their hand at. But which ones actually work? And what do most investors actually need? The thing is, Most people investing in property in Australia start out the same way. They collect some money in cash, equity, or a self-managed superannuation fund and head out looking for a deal, that perfect property that will help them to build wealth and achieve all their goals. This short-sighted vision is often why many investors fail to get the results that they actually desire. When challenged by things out of their control, they simply forget about the end goal and never reach point B. Often, that's because their point B was never clearly articulated in the first place. This pivotal concept provided the premise for Luke's first book, Let's Get Real. In this book, the focus was on you as the investor, clarifying your goals and working out your why, just as Luke and I did. As mentors, we also work on your plans and your mindset, which can each influence your success as a property investor. So most investors plan to fail because they fail to plan. Luke's book recognized that we all have different dreams, desires, and goals in life, and that to achieve those exceptional results, you need to apply different pathways rather than a single right way. Not everyone needs a $10 million property portfolio, so why aim for it? Remember, it's the result you're ultimately after, not the property itself. When you let your emotions get in the way, that's where you become unstuck. After 20 years of buying property, Luke's message is that there are no silver bullets. I mean, some silver bullet strategies do work for some people some of the time, but it's more about doing it the right way with the right processes in place and creating a pathway to profit that is slower and steadier rather than reactive and rushed. We can tell you that the magic unicorn property simply doesn't exist either. And this fundamental fact is what separates professional property investors with long-term sustainable wealth from those who are simply out dabbling in property investments and hoping that it all works out. Remember, we're here to talk about investing, not speculating. We're here to talk about long-term wealth creation, not making a quick buck or trying to buy low and sell high and pick the market. So let's go back a step. The key message from Luke's first book was to work out your why and why your why actually matters. Essentially, your why is everything. Luke encourages you to think about his first book as a why-to guide, so that your investment success is more about good planning and tactical execution rather than a lack of access to technical information. He also wrote the book to give you a chance to learn about your emotional self and to master all of those emotions that may hold you back from achieving your goals. Because if you're going to become a property investor, you'll need to strap yourself in and ask yourself some tough questions first. So let's do that. So before you skip to the part where you consider the best property fit for you, you'll need to work out your property investment profile. Think of it as a self-assessment exercise that you must fill out to see which strategies are actually going to suit you best. Now, Luke highly advises you to think carefully about where you sit, because these responses will help to guide your best fit in property investing. So firstly, what's your risk profile? How risky is an investment based on your age, financial position, and knowledge, as well as your actual understanding of the strategy? Remember that what suits one investor can be a complete disaster for another. And your risk profile will likely change as you increase your education and your experience. Next, what's your asset position? Depending on the strategy, you'll likely need some sort of security to offer a lender. This doesn't always have to be another property, but this is typically the most attractive to lenders. Often, the more risk involved in the strategy, the more security the lender requires. Thirdly, what's your cash position? You're going to need some skin in the game. So depending on the strategy, you'll either need a small amount of capital to get started, or you might need access to lots of capital. Regardless, Luke always recommends having good buffers in place for a rainy day, because we promise you that it does rain and you will need access to cash. Fourthly, what's your exit strategy? Successful investing takes time, energy, and patience, but you need to have a very clear idea of your exit strategy before parting with your money in any investment. Of course, for most people, this is one of the hardest things to calculate, because there are many unknowns. However, this is a crucial component to successful investing. And lastly, how much time do you have? Property investing can be an almost entirely passive investment, partly hands-on or an all hands-on deck game. How much time you have available will be an important factor to determine which strategies are best for your personal situation. As for time, this is not something you should try to squeeze into your current lifestyle. Investing in property is something that needs clear and focused time if you're looking for the best results. You either have the time to do it properly or you don't. So as you can hear, Luke and I have a very similar approach to property, because property is just the vehicle and the means to your end, as it's more about the principles, the processes, and the people that you need to embrace to achieve sustainable success over the long term. So if you're serious about achieving financial freedom through property, grab yourself a copy of Luke's book, Property Fit, at www.propertyfitbook.com.au. And to get you in the mood, part 1 of my great chat with Luke unpacks his own personal property investment journey. As you're about to hear, with big dreams, persistence, and a can-do attitude, Luke Harris now has over 2 decades of property investment experience and success, and he's built an enviable property portfolio and acquired an extraordinary depth and breadth of experience across business, property, and investing along the way. Now successfully established, again, like yours truly, Luke and I share an ambition to help you and other investors to grow significant wealth through property, helping you to fulfill your own dreams and your ambitions. And Luke does this through his business, The Property Mentors, a Melbourne-based agency that helps you develop the skills, mindset, and knowledge to grow your property portfolio. And in a similar vein, if you'd like an hour of power to talk with me personally on any questions, queries, or issues you'd like to discuss about your investment strategy, finance, or property portfolio delivery, whether you're an aspiring investor or an experienced investor with a substantial property portfolio, just jump on knowhowproperty.com.au, hit the purple book appointment button in the top right-hand corner, then click on the Let's Zoom Deep Dive Meeting with Bushy 1 hour option to book in your preferred time. And for a small investment of just $295, you can ask me anything you want about property for a full 60 minutes. In the meantime, enjoy part 1 of my great conversation with Luke Harris.
Hi, Freedom Fighters. Now, at the time of this recording, the property market's enjoying a once-in-a-30-year boom. And for investors, there's never been a better time to supercharge your portfolio. But just like we approach our personal fitness, there's a proven process to getting your property investments into shape to achieve peak performance. So to discuss this, we're joined by Luke Harris, author of his recently released second book, Property Fit, that shows you how to get your property portfolio in shape for financial freedom. So welcome, and let's get invested, Luke.
Thanks, Bushy.
Great to have you on board, mate. Yeah, it's really enjoyed your most recent book, which we'll get into shortly. But for those amongst the listeners who don't know who you are, mate, can you start by telling us who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I started a business called The Property Mentors about 8 years ago now to teach people about investing in property, I guess with a bit of a twist. There's a lot of investors out there that are trying to make a quick buck. So I went through my own property journey and realised that there's a lot of different ways to do property, as you understand, Bushy. A lot of people trying to do property, and really I was looking for a way to get out there and get the results, but really have a bit more structure around what I was doing. So after investing for 21 years, I've now got a system and a process that I follow, and really to get people to understand how to do it for the long term rather than just trying to go out there and hope for the best.
Yeah, no, brilliant, which is something sadly missing given that 95% of investors focus on the property, and what they ignore at their own peril is the principles, the process, and the people they need to surround themselves with to really achieve any level of sustainable success. But mate, we'll dig into that in some depth as we get going. Where I'd love to start, if you can, is just to take us through your life journey so far and sort of take us through where you've invested your time, energy and money, What have been the highs, the lows, the learnings, and how's that taking you to where you are today?
Well, look, I can give you a long story or a short story, but
Yeah,
we'll go somewhere.
give us a
Somewhere
long
in the
one.
middle.
Yeah.
Look, I from a very young age, I was always, I guess, quite entrepreneurial. If you ask my parents, bless them, they've put up with quite a bit over the years. I was out there as a 10 or 12-year-old selling stuff from mum and dad's kitchen out on the street. It was the equivalent of having an 11/8 stand, I guess.
Flogging the stuff out of the kitchen to sell it to the...
Yeah, selling whatever I could. Dad's got a really good story of me digging up Australian grass trees out of the backyard, and I sold them in the local newspaper. And he'd come home from work one day, and there were people digging them up, and I'd actually sold them in the local newspaper. I think I was about 9 or 10 years old. So from a very young age, I think I kind of, I guess I was always looking at other ways of doing things. Since pocket money wasn't given to us, we had to work for it. So I was out there washing the cars, mowing the lawns, doing what I could, and always sort of pretty active in trying to make money, because then I could buy more lollies. We walked down the street and got lollies, or we'd go and buy fish and chips. You get $2 worth of chips, minimum chips. You get quite a lot of chips for $2 back then.
Mate, I'm with you. It's amazing how parallel. I'm a little bit older than you, and I don't want to declare, but same thing at my age. We had no pocket money whatsoever, so we used to ride around the neighbourhood finding empty bottles and weeding gardens and all the rest of it. But here's the thing, mate. I've got to share this with you. I used to be able to buy a bag of lollies for $0.01. So that gives you a bit of a hint of how long ago it was, mate. But I interrupt the story. Keep going, mate. It's
so roughly the same age, but maybe a year or two in between. But my pop, one of my granddads, lived down in Bunbury, 2 hours south of Perth, and every time we'd go down to Bunbury to see them, he would have all of his Coke bottles saved up. We'd get 15 cents for every single one. And I think I used to get money for the brown beer bottles as well, and there was certainly quite a lot of those. And when the grandkids would come down, I was the oldest of all the grandkids, so we'd all pack all 4 of us in the car. We'd drive down to trade all the bottles in. He had a really old, rusty Gemini, and we put them in every nook and cranny of that car and cash them in, and we'd get $20 to split between 4 of us. We'd go shopping and buy a new toy. So that was a lot of fun as kids, and I think that, without really knowing it, taught me about other ways to make money other than just working for it. And I remember also going into the equivalent of Harvey Norman. I think it was a Retrovision or something back then.
Yeah.
And he said he was buying a new toaster or kettle, I think it was. And he said, look, do you realise you don't have to pay the price on the shelf? You can actually ask them for a discount. And he said, I'll give you $30 for the kettle instead of $35. And he actually got it. And I thought, geez, that's pretty good. You don't have to pay the price on the shelf. So little things like that I didn't take much notice of at the time, but I realised that the world of money is not as black and white as people think.
Yep.
So I guess from a young age, I did things like paper rounds, and as soon as I was allowed to, being 14 years and 6 months old, I got a job at Hungry Jack's. And I actually caught the train from the local train station into Perth CBD. And I remember the train ticket was $1.10 each way. And because mum and dad wouldn't drive me into work, a little bit rude, but they wouldn't drive me into the city. And $1.10 on the train. And then it was probably about a 30-minute train trip into town for a 3-hour shift, earning $5.21 an hour. So that was my first job, but I was over the moon to get that job. I didn't care if it was flipping burgers or whatever it was, but it was a job.
Awesome.
I did that for some time, and then I relocated out to the suburban Hungry Jack's, and then continued to work there for some time. Had an amazing time there because everyone at Hungry Jack's was my age, and give or take a year or two, and it was just a fun place to be. We worked hard, but we had a lot of fun at the same time. But I guess from that age, I didn't really enjoy school. I hated school, actually. I got into detention and got expelled, and I was always in the naughty corner for wearing the wrong school uniform or just being a brat, basically. Not a huge amount's change, but I certainly wasn't the academic type. Never enjoyed really sitting in a classroom and being told to learn something I didn't want to learn. Yeah. I didn't know the reasons why at the time, but I just didn't want to learn stuff that I didn't care about.
Yeah.
And I do believe that that the education system is a little bit outdated for what the world that we're in now. But
Yeah.
that's a whole nother podcast, I'm sure.
I agree.
So I did that, and I left school at 16 because I wanted to go and get a job as an electrician. I thought, well,
Okay.
that looks like something fun, and I wrote about 80 or 85 letters to local electricians trying to find a job as an apprentice. I was willing to do anything to get a job, and unfortunately, the mining boom in WA hadn't started yet, not to the extent that it did in the mid 2000s, and nobody got back to me. I couldn't get a job. I did a trial for one day. The guy was not a pleasant man to be around, so I certainly didn't follow through on that. We just didn't get along, and from that point, I found a job with a local security company doing electronic security, and I thought, well, if I can do that for a little while, maybe an electrician will hire me. So I left school to do that, and I actually got a traineeship at the time, which was a full-time job, but slightly lower rates than Hungry Jack's, and I was getting $4.71 per hour. This is back in 1996, 1997. So I did that for a little while, quickly changed jobs and got a job with another security company, a slightly higher pay. I think my total salary package was $11,000 a year. But again, I was over the moon because it meant that I could afford a car and, got my first car and really, got out there in the real world, as they say.
Yep.
And then it wasn't long after that I had a really good relationship with my boss at my company. And I said to him, look, Peter, I want to make more money. What do I do? And he says, well, if you want to, you can go and install some security alarms on the weekend and we'll pay you the same rate we pay our subcontractors. And I thought, that's a pretty good deal. I'll put some roof racks on the car and go and do that on the weekend. I'll work during the week at the office and then, I can go out and make some more money. And I did that. And after a few months of doing that, I thought, I'm making almost half my paycheck just by working on a Saturday.
Yeah.
So I went up to Peter and said, mate, can I do this full time? I want to become a contractor. And he said, look, if you really want to, you just have to hire somebody to do your job in the company and we'll let you go and do that. So very accommodating. I think he realised that I wasn't going to stick around if he didn't let me do what I wanted to do. Yeah. So he thought, might as well keep him in the company. So I did that. And then it wasn't long after that I thought, well, why am I subcontracting for this company? I'm earning some good money now, but why don't I go and get my own customers? You're smart enough. All you have to do is get some people that want some security and then, all of a sudden you've got your own customers. So I turned that into a brand, and at 19, I set up a business called A1 Secure Solutions, purely because I couldn't register the name without sticking A1 in front of it. So
it's top of the yellow pages or something. Was that the
top
idea?
of the yellow pages, that's it. Back when you had to pay for yellow pages ads, I don't think I ever got a phone call from yellow pages. Well before Google really took off. So, yeah, look, after that, I thought I'm going to go and get my own customers. So I ran some ads in the local paper. And in between contracting to this company, I started getting my own customers and very quickly realised that I had a little business there. And I started hiring some staff and bought some extra vehicles. And, in my 19, 20, I was a young teenager turning into a 20-year-old. I had a company. And I was out there running my own business. So it sort of wasn't really much by design, but it was more the fact that I didn't want to do certain things. So I took the alternative route. Yeah. And I think for me, really, that was, I guess, a defining moment in my life, moving out of the full-time workforce as a 19-year-old and starting a business at 19 without really having any experience on how to run a business, how to structure it, how to fund it.
Yeah, where did because there's a lot of confidence I'm hearing in just and courage or maybe a mix of naivety thrown in there as well, perhaps. But where did that sort of self-confidence come from to say, right, I'm just going to go and have a crack?
I don't know if there's a specific thing that I could link that back to, but I know that one of the other things that I was doing while I was out the front of mum and dad's, selling stuff out of their kitchen, I would also drive around. I would walk around the streets when they had the local rubbish collections. Yeah. And I thought that mum and dad would drive us to the shops and wherever we went in the car, and I'd see more of the suburb, or I'd get on my bike and just ride around as you did as a kid. And I thought, there's perfectly good chairs there. There's a perfectly good table. Why are they throwing that away? Because we're a family of 6. Mum and dad had 4 kids, and we didn't have a luxury lifestyle. We had a modest house in the suburbs. It was a nice place. We didn't have a pool like everyone else did. I always thought mum and dad were really mean, and why didn't we have a pool? Very spoilt, some of our friends were. But I went around the suburbs and I thought, why are people throwing these things away? So I started collecting it all and filling up the garage with it. And after a while, Mum and Dad just thought, oh, this is just Luke. He's just crazy. Let him do what he does. I think they just gave up after a while. And I eventually borrowed a trailer from my auntie, and she let me take it to the local swap meet. And I think I was 12 when I first started doing that. Dad would get up. Dad was a marathon runner. He always ran marathon runs and Perth Fun Run and a lot of things. So he was very committed in his, vision for what he wanted for his running career.
Yep.
And really, Dad just got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, drove me to the swap mart at the local shopping centre, unloaded the trailer and all my gear. And I was literally standing there as a 12-year-old on my own, negotiating with people on how much they were going to pay for chairs and various other bits and pieces that I picked up. So I would walk away from a swap mart with a couple of $100.
Nice.
As a 12-year-old, and I would spend 5 or 6 hours there. I'd be exhausted by the end of it, covered in dust and who knows whatever else from the underground car park. But I had people that, I remember there was a Vietnamese guy that came up to me, and they know how to negotiate. And he was negotiating with me, and I remember almost having an argument with this guy about the price of something. I'm like, no, $5, and he's like, no, $3. And I'm having these negotiations as a 12-year-old, and really, I just threw myself into it. I don't think there was any real planning behind it, but I don't know whether that had anything to do with it. But from a young age, I guess I wanted to get out there and make some money. And one of the reasons I did that is because Dad was into running, did the Perth Fun Run a number of times, and Perth Marathon and so forth. And a lot of people that we would see there had video cameras.
Yeah.
We're talking 1992, 1993, right? This was well before any digital stuff came out. Yep. And they were still expensive. And I remember a catalogue came out, the local newspaper, and it was $999. I want this thing, cut it out, stuck it on the wall. Now, I hadn't read any books about goal setting or anything. I just thought, I want that. I'm going to see it every day. And eventually, that's what I did. I used my savings from that to go and buy a video camera, and so that I could film Dad at his races. So, very, not very planned. But like I was a very, very strange kid, I think, looking back. If I met somebody like me now, I mean, when I was that age as well, I had a little book, a little A4 book, and I would record every bit of money that I made and every bit of money that I spent. So I'd never heard of a spreadsheet, didn't understand any of that, but I wanted to know where my money was going. So I recorded it all, and I couldn't care less about maths in school, hated maths. But as far as budgeting and looking after my own money, I had every line, I had lollies in there. I had like literally everything was documented in there. And I've still got these books. It's quite embarrassing to look back at it. At the time, I hid them. I didn't want anyone to read them. I didn't want anyone to know. I thought it was embarrassing. But anyway, so I was very much into sort of managing my finances from a young age without really any training or knowing why I was doing it. I just wanted to know how much I'd made each month.
Yeah.
So look, I guess that's where the business sort of confidence came from, in that I thought I've already done negotiations with people. I was very good at negotiating with Mum and Dad. They'd give me $2 to go and wash the car, and I'd negotiate to $2.50. And Mum wanted something from the shops, and I said, well, only if I can buy 50 cents worth of lollies. And I don't know how I managed to get away with what I did.
But as you said before, mate, I think they saw in you who you were, and there's no point getting in the way of that. It's just keeping a loose leash on you so that you didn't get too out of control.
I think so, yeah. They always supported me in what I did, but I mean, I'm sure they pulled the reins in every now and then. But I think they had a big sigh every now and then and thought, well, let's just let him do his thing.
Let's swing back to sort of 1920. I think that's roughly when you'd started to dip your toe in the property arena. Sort of in parallel with what you were doing professionally. Take us through your property journey, because again, getting your first property at 20, there's not too many that stump up to do that. So I'd love you to talk us through why property in the first place. What was the interest there, and then to take us on the journey in terms of what you did from there and why.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll just rewind a couple of years before that actually happened to link that in. I think from about 16 onwards, and when I'd started working full time, my parents had actually been invited by a friend of theirs to join Amway.
Okay.
And, people on the call might be cringing right now, and some people may have never heard of it. But Amway was this multi-level marketing business, but it wasn't really focused on, in hindsight, it wasn't really focused on making money. Not for the people joining the business, at least.
Yeah.
I'm sure someone was making money, but I joined it, and part of that process was they had motivational tapes every week that you would have to buy. They were $6 each, and a lot of books as part of the process, because they wanted to have a system in place for you to improve your mindset on various things. So they have, I think, book of the week or book of the month, and they would have tape of the week that you would listen to. And essentially they were motivational and educational at the same time.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of lessons from that because I read a lot of books, like The Magic of Thinking Big, which is one of my favorite books ever written, and The Millionaire Next Door, and a few of those, old books that have been around for a long time, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I think I got a lot of lessons from that I just would never have learnt at school.
Yeah.
And the stuff that I learnt from that as a 16 and 17-year-old, didn't make any money out of Amway.
Yeah.
I sold my family a vacuum cleaner. I sold my auntie a vacuum cleaner. She messaged me a couple of years ago, said she still got it. So it must have been a good investment. It was 20 years ago. And I bought one for myself because I could get more points in my Amway business. So I didn't make any money, but I learned a lot of business skills out of that. And really, How to Win Friends and Influence People was really a way of how to deal with people as such. Very old book, but
Great
still a lot
book.
of concepts in there that are relevant.
Brilliant book. Timeless.
Oh, that's it. It is timeless. It's something you can use in any market. A lot of the language is a bit out of date, but you get the message through reading that. But really, to get into my first property, I was out there they had this thing with Amway called dream building, about going out there and looking and feeling and touching the things that you want to buy or that you want out of life. Now, the thing that was missing from that is all of the stuff that you can't look and feel and touch, having good health care and having, being healthy and having a healthy mind and having a healthy body. That stuff they can't motivate you with. So they said, go and look at yachts, go look at supercars, go look at fancy houses, because that's what will motivate you all. And to a certain extent it did. I mean, I was 16, I was 17, I got my driver's license, and here's me as a 17-year-old using my spare time, driving around Peppermint Grove in Perth, Atterdale, all these really expensive suburbs along the river, Mosman Park.
Nice.
And looking at multi-million-dollar homes. Back then, a $2 million house, wow, who can afford that?
Yeah.
Now it's almost the median price in Perth. But, looking back at that, I got a lot of motivation by looking at these expensive houses and looking at, these beautiful pools and these beautiful cars, and just the suburbs themselves were really nice. Not that we lived in a bad suburb, but we certainly didn't live in the best suburbs.
Yeah.
And for me, that was motivating. And for me to get into property, I couldn't wait. From the minute I started earning an income, I wanted a property.
Yeah.
And I loved renovating and pulling the parents' bathrooms apart, ripping the tiles off. They came home from work one day and I was pulling tiles off the bathroom, saying, "We've got blue tiles? They're ugly. Let's put new ones on." And that's. Yeah, we can do that, but we need money to do those things. Again, that's a whole other story. But I think getting into property was a big thing. So I just worked my butt off as a 19-year-old, just running the business. I was working 7 days a week and just doing everything I could to save to get that deposit together. And I'd been speaking to mortgage brokers since I was about 17 or 18, and they'd said, no, you can't. You're not making enough money. And then when I turned 19, I thought, well, I've run my own business now, and look at my figures. I'm making good numbers. And they said, no, banks don't want to talk to you because you're self-employed. And so I sort of worked around that, and I said, look, what if I can get my parents involved? What if they go guarantor on the loan? And they said, look, if you can save up a little bit extra, we can potentially do it that way. And eventually, I was able to get a bank to lend to me with my parents as guarantor.
Yep.
And that's how I got started. I saved up enough for my deposit and saved up enough for my stamp duty. And unfortunately, around 2000, when I bought the property, that's when the first home buyers grants had just started. And I missed out on the $7,000 for my first home because my parents had to go guarantor on the loan.
Okay.
So that was a bit of a shame. But at the end of the day, like I tell people now, you don't make all your decisions based on one government grant. So that's really how I got started.
Yeah, love it. So, talk us through because obviously I've got an interest in the property journey. I'd love for you to take us through your thinking, your strategy, and how your portfolio then rolled out, and the learnings as you went through, and where that led you to property-wise.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I sort of split my property journey into two sections. In that, the first section is between ages 20 and 30, and then the ages of 30. Let's just say 30 plus.
Yeah.
So ages 20 to 30 was really my learning years. And I bought a lot of property, made a lot of mistakes, and did a lot of things the wrong way during my 20s. And I guess that's part of that naivety that I was just going out there to give it a go, wanted to make money in property, had made money in property.
Yep.
But really looking back at it, I could have done things a lot differently. And I guess the process that I went through, how I teach people now, is that I very much took a zigzag approach. Yeah. And the reason I did that was very reactive. I would go out there, like a lot of investors, they're trying to make money out of property. Everyone's got good intentions.
Yeah.
But the issue that I found was that I was jumping from one thing to the next. And I was doing that because I didn't have any advisor around me. I didn't have any guidance to really direct me as to what to do next and in what order. And like a lot of people, to a certain extent, I relied on my advisors to tell me what to do when they weren't really engaged for that purpose.
Yeah.
So I relied on my mortgage broker, who I found on an internet chat room. And apparently he was a guru, but it turns out that he'd changed his career halfway through and didn't want to do finance anymore. So maybe he wasn't. But he decided he wanted to be a lawyer. And so, through the journey, I would do one thing based on what the media was saying, based on what property books and webinars weren't around, and podcasts certainly weren't around. But anything that I could get my hands on, I was reading and soaking up. And that's not a bad thing to do. But the problem is there's so much information out there these days. And obviously 20 years ago, a lot less information, but now information is everywhere. There's so much information out there.
Yeah.
And so I was zigzagging through my portfolio, making decisions, what I thought was the best at the time, discussing with my mortgage broker, with my accountant, and hoping that they would build wealth for me. But that wasn't their job. And a lot of people assume wrongly that their accountant is there to help them build wealth. Really, your accountant's there.
Save tax.
They're technically called tax accountants.
Yep.
Right? We've shortened that to accountant, but really it's tax accountant. They're there to look after your tax affairs.
Yeah.
And even a financial planner, bless them, they're there to give you advice predominantly around super and to talk about your insurances and financial products.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the financial planning industry doesn't talk about $9 trillion worth of property.
They're not allowed
missing
to.
One,
yeah.
The biggest asset class in the whole country. So that's
Totally.
that's a whole nother podcast. But I think the thing is I was trying to rely on expert advice when I was really not talking to the right experts. And I guess the first decade of my investing was really around zigzagging and trying to find stuff that I thought was a good investment, but didn't really fit into a long-term plan.
Yeah. So can you sort of break that down a bit for us? So put some colour around, the properties you bought during that time and what you thought, and then why they didn't quite fit the bill and where that took you to. I'd love you to put some shape around that if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. So in my 20s, I'll give a brief summary and then come back. But essentially, in my 20s, I did pretty much everything out of the box. And in my latest book, Property Fit, I talk about the different property investor types, and we've covered that in Let's Get Real as well.
Yeah.
I want to try everything at the buffet. Right? And the portfolio very much looked like this. I bought my first property, which was a house. Then I went and bought an apartment. Then I went and bought in a mining town. Then I bought a development site. Then I did a unit development. Then I bought off the plan. So the whole portfolio was literally taking a stab at everything. And whilst I've never lost money on a property, I could have done it a lot differently. So really the second property that I bought was after I moved to Sydney. So in 2003, I sold my security company. We had 3 cars on the road and a bunch of staff. And I realised that, I was sort of outgrowing Perth as a 23-year-old, getting itchy feet. Mum would say that I'm a Gemini and I get bored easily. Maybe I was bored. Who knows? If you follow the star signs, but essentially, I'd always wanted to move to Sydney to have the flashy lights. I feel like I'm in my early 20s. I need to go and have a bit of a social life as well because I was working 7, 8, or 9 days a week, running my own business. I thought I'm too young for this, right? I don't need this. I've made a bit of money. I was driving a brand new Holden Monaro, happy days. Everything's good. Bright yellow car. I thought I was pretty cool, but look, I thought I need to balance my stress out, or I'm just going to go crazy and get old too quick. So I did that, moved to Sydney, and part of the reason for moving to Sydney was that I went to go and get a loan for a second property. And they said, no, you can't. You're self-employed. We're not interested in you. You've already got one property. That's enough. And me not taking no for an answer, I thought, well, screw you then. I'm going to sell my business and get a job then. Take that. And that's what I did. I interviewed over in Sydney, flew over there a couple of times, got a job, moved house, moved the dog, the cat, the other cat, and the car, and that was it. I was in Sydney, and less than 12 months after that, they relocated me to Melbourne. They said, look, we realise you're not really enjoying Sydney like you should be. I made that pretty clear to them. And then they said, look, we're opening up a branch in Melbourne. Would you like to move? And so I did that. And around that time that I arrived in Melbourne, I bought my second property in a suburb called Wembley in WA. Again, I was buying in the city that I knew.
Yep.
And like a lot of investors, I know the area, so I'm going to buy there. And it is good to a certain extent because you do feel like you've got your finger on the pulse a little bit more. But at the same time, there were other areas around the country that I could have invested in had I known how to do that research.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did that, and a friend of mine who's now passed away, unfortunately, he was a carpenter. He flew over with me from Melbourne. We packed up our toolboxes. We organised a renovation to be done on that apartment in 7 days. Now, it didn't take 7 days. We did it in 11 days. But from getting the keys to moving the skanky old couch out of the place that the tenant left behind and the carpet, the whole lot, start to finish, took us 11 days. And I tell you, I will never do an 11-day renovation ever again in my life. We were there till 2 o'clock in the morning. Oh, amazing. But anyway, that's what you do as a 24-year-old.
You do.
Right? So,
bit of a false economy there to some degree as well. It's the old, I'll do it myself, but then there's the cost of doing so. And I'm imagining there was probably quite a bit of carton currency going on.
There absolutely was, along with paying for his flights and accommodation. But he'd never been to Perth before, and it was a good chance for him. I didn't give him much time to go out. I think I gave him half an hour a day to go and explore Perth. But yeah, but really, really amazing guy, and really helped me to do that. And I think there's a better story for a renovation, which I can cover afterwards. But I did that. And then I guess one of the things that I was doing at the same time, like I said earlier, was reading lots of books and magazines and everything I could get my hands on. And one of the books that I read around that time was Steve McKnight's book, 0 to 130 Properties in 15 Minutes, or around that time frame. Fantastic book. And I got a lot out of that. And it wasn't so much about the specific properties that he'd bought. It was more about the concept even of cash flow investing.
Yeah.
And I've not really heard about that before. So for me, really learning about that strategy really opened up my eyes, saying, oh, well, if you could buy lots of cheap properties that rent for more than the mortgage, you can just keep buying them. That sounds great. Problem is, I think the actual title is 0 to 130 in 3.5 years.
Yeah.
I'm sort of joking around about 15 minutes because a lot of people want the get rich quick stuff. But and I did too, of course. Now, 3.5 years meant that 3.5 years before he wrote the book, that's when he was buying the property. So all the prices that he listed in the book for $65,000 in Bendigo and Ballarat.
Ballarat, yeah.
3.5 years before he wrote the book, and then I bought it a year after it came out. So we're talking about numbers that were 4.5 years out of date.
Yeah.
And so I got online and started looking around for these areas. I thought, what are you talking about? You can't buy anything for less than 150,000.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'm going to have to explore other areas. So I went down to Tassie and I thought, well, I can buy a house down there for $79,500, which I did.
Yeah.
In Queenstown. And if you mention Queenstown to anyone in Australia, they think about snowing and ski resorts and all of the fun stuff. And oh wow, you bought in Queenstown? No, not Queenstown, New Zealand. Queenstown,
It's like
Tasmania.
a ghost town, mining town in Tassie, mate. I know it. I've driven through it.
Very much so. And look, it's a very strange part of the world.
It looks like a place after the apocalypse, mate.
After the apocalypse, exactly. And it did back then, and it still does now. And I bought that property because it was cheap and it was renting for $120 a week. So I figured, well, property number 3, that's really cool. Bought that. The contract in Tasmania, I think, was 2 pages. And I was shocked. I said to the agent, where's the rest of the contract? And she said, that's it. No such thing as a Section 32 like you see in Victoria, 100 pages. So anyway, it was very much buyer beware. And I did that, and I held that property for 10 or 12 years and got rid of it purely because it's more of a hassle than anything else.
Yeah.
And, like a lot of investors, I bought that property in my own name. And I've since sold down a number of properties in my own name and put them in different structures. Again, it's probably another conversation altogether on that as well. But that was the next one, and then after that, I went and bought in Melbourne because Melbourne's property market in 2005 wasn't doing a great deal at all. It was actually quite dead.
Yep.
No real media attention on Melbourne. It wasn't really doing much. Perth, meanwhile, was picking up. And mine was really starting to ramp up, and property was, Perth property was the golden child in Australia back then. And so Melbourne was just sitting there quiet doing its thing. So that gave me an opportunity to go and explore Melbourne. And being from beachside WA, I started looking down the coast in Melbourne and said, what can I buy for $200,000 or $300,000?
Yeah.
And you think back now, geez, what could you ever buy in Melbourne for that price? But back then, there were plenty of suburbs, and I've still got a piece of paper that I wrote down a list of suburbs, and those suburbs back then were, $250,000 to $300,000.
Yep.
And now they're $1 million suburbs.
Yep.
And I went and bought a really old house in a suburb called Bomb Beach.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful part of Melbourne, sort of heading down towards the peninsula there.
Yeah, it is.
And I found this house that the agent wouldn't even walk through with me. That's how bad it was.
Looking for a bulletproof vest or something, were you, mate?
Well, not so much for that reason, but was more rats, mice, and who knows what else. And the front door didn't open. That's why she said, look, I can't take you through because I don't have a key for it. And if I did, it probably wouldn't open. Went to the back of the place through all of the long lawn and everything else to get there. And the back pergola had fallen down above the back door, but if you kind of squeezed through, you could get in there, and the door was open. She just said, I'm going to wait out here because for health and safety reasons, I don't think I want to risk my life. So I said, that's fine, I'll go through, and had a look through. It was a very small Californian bungalow type home, 2 bedrooms, 1 lounge room and a kitchen, just 4 principal rooms.
Yep.
And a sort of a half-finished bathroom. So it had been tiled, but there were no showers or anything in there installed. And then there was an really old wash house type room where the washing machine should go. And that room, it absolutely stank. So I bought that property for $255,000. I paid. The contract was written up for $260,000. The bank went out and said, we're not going to give you that money because it's got no kitchen and bathroom. And so I went back to the agent and said, look, I can't get a loan for this because the bank said it's uninhabitable. Yep. And they're not going to lend on it. So I said, I'm going to go back and put a bathroom and kitchen in there. You need to give me access to do that. And I want $5,000 off the price so that I can do that. And they accepted it. I didn't think they would. So, I went on eBay and bought a bunch of stuff for less than $1,000. I had a secondhand kitchen in there and a vanity unit, and we literally got it finished in a couple of weeks for $1,000.
Love it.
Got the valuation done again, valued at contract price, and we're all happy days and managed to settle on that property. Went through the process of subdividing that block and ended up selling it in 2010 and made a few $100,000 on that. Melbourne's market had absolutely picked up. We'd been through the GFC and things were getting back to normal again. So that was a good little investment. I did plan on developing 2 townhouses on that block and living there. But plans changed as they do. And, I changed my plans like a lot of investors do.
Yep.
There's a few more after that. I can keep going.
I'm sort of liking the learning, and what's becoming evident here is that you're as good as the next book that you read, And so you're sort of chasing a number of different types of approach to the exercise, but all the time building your knowledge, which eventually your knowledge is going to get to a stage where you're getting clear on what the strategy needs to be. So
Yes, I think it needed some reflection. I think that's what didn't happen along the way.
Yeah.
Because what I was doing was working. I wasn't losing money.
Yeah.
And the properties were going up in value, and I was meeting the mortgage repayments, and I was going through the process. So I thought what I was doing was working,
Yeah.
and to a certain extent, it was working. It certainly wasn't failing.
Yeah.
But there could have been better ways of doing it. But like you said, reading books and magazines and sort of learning as you go type of approach is what a lot of investors do, because there's really no other option. They don't have somebody there offering to guide them and mentor them through the process. So my next purchase just happened to be while I was in Vegas, actually. I'll just skip back a few steps before I discuss Vegas, but when I was relocated to Melbourne for the security company that I worked for in Sydney, they relocated me to help open their branch office in Doncaster.
Oh, yeah.
And I travelled from South Yarra to Doncaster every day. And after a while, I said, look, guys, I'm putting in a lot of hours here. I'm trying to help you to establish the brand in Melbourne, but head office wasn't supporting the branch office that they'd opened up. And I said, we need some marketing help. We need admin support. I'm literally not here to do all of the admin work. And at the same time, they weren't spending any money on marketing. So I had to go around door knocking, trying to get business, from commercial customers. I think I'd already done that back when I was about 16 or 17. I was like, I'm not going to do that. That's not I'm too good for that.
Yeah.
But it really is grunt work for really not a lot of return. So it's a very slow burn. And especially if I was trying to earn a commission, not the sort of business that I wanted to do. So I thought, if I'm going to have to be doing that sort of work, I'm going to do it for myself.
Yeah.
And I actually told them this time, I said, look, I'm going to go and start my own business unless you guys support this one.
Yeah.
And you can imagine what they said. They said, no, we're going to do it our way. You don't know what you're talking about. So that's fine. I started my own business again. So at 25, I started a business called Monitored Alarms. So the joys of running your own business were that you could go to security conferences in Vegas. And I think when I was not long after I'd started the business, there just happened to be an annual conference in Vegas, and conveniently I was still single and got the opportunity to go and explore Vegas for the first time. So I flew over there and had an amazing, very educational experience over in Vegas, and I learnt a lot about what not to put money on, and I learnt what not to drink, what drinks not to mix with each other, and I learnt that you can lose track of time in Vegas. As far as security is concerned, I'm sure it helped the business in some way, but I don't know exactly what way. But one of the things, funny how things work out. I was actually very late, very, very late at night. Got home from a night out, and I put on late night cable TV in the hotel. I stayed at the Luxor Hotel, and put on these late night American TV shows, and you see all the ads and everything else that go for 20 minutes. And then they had this thing on Donald Trump. And I thought, oh, wow, look at this guy's like super successful. And, now we've learnt a little bit more. Not going to go into detail, but, as a 25-year-old, I thought, geez, this guy's done really well. He's developed this and developed that. And, I kind of looked up to him to a certain extent.
Yeah.
After that, I didn't really hear of the guy. I didn't have anything to do with him, but I remember watching that late at night. But after that show finished, there was a show on Americans that were flipping property.
Yeah.
And I thought, these people are going out there and they're flipping, renovating and flipping them and all this sort of thing. And they don't have the same tax system that we do. So I thought maybe that's a good idea.
Yep.
Don't worry about capital gains tax. We'll deal with that later. And one of the things that they were doing was that they were going out there and they were building on the back of the backyard of houses and putting another house at the back. About 3 or 4 weeks before I went to Vegas, I just put an offer in, which had been accepted, on a property in Seaford in Victoria, because I thought if I bought, and this area was definitely an up and coming area, close to the train station and the beach and so forth, and I thought I wanted to buy a development site. So knowing that I'd done it on Bomb Beach, which is a couple of suburbs away, I bought a block of land with a house on it with a view to knock it down and put 2 townhouses on it. But when I was in Vegas on my little work trip, I watched this late night documentary and had this little aha moment going, Luke, you're an idiot. Why are you going to knock down that perfectly good house when you can keep it, renovate it, and just build a new one out the back.
Yeah.
But I quickly got online, and I tell you, Wi-Fi internet was not a thing back then. You had to plug in a cable, and it was about $20 an hour, and it was, and you certainly no iPhones to just jump in and have a look. But I made it work somehow, and I looked it up, and I thought that property, it's 600 square metres. It needs to be 630 square metres as a minimum to be able to do that. Otherwise, I've got to relocate the whole house at the front to make it work. So I emailed the agent and said, can you get me out of the contract? He said, no, I can't. But if you settle on it, I can probably get you an extra $30,000 or $40,000.
Okay.
So I ended up settling on that property, paid the $15,000 or $16,000 stamp duty, listed it with the agent again straight away, and I think he got an extra $35,000 for me.
Came out even once you look at your selling costs. Yeah.
All because the market was doing so well, and he managed to find me what I wanted, whereas something you could build in the backyard and renovate the front house. So that was a big lesson, and once again, I didn't lose any money on that deal. But geez, if I'd been to Vegas sooner, maybe I could have learnt a few things. So there's a lesson in there: travel more often.
Love it. Yep. So did you end up doing that development?
Yes, I did, and kept those for a number of years. Kept the old house, and this is another lesson I learnt through renovating. When you mentioned before, 11 days doing a renovation and factoring in your time and all of the other costs involved in travelling there. There was another aha moment that happened when I was about 26 or so, and I bought that property in Seaford, and I was going down there. I was living in Paran at the same time in Melbourne's inner east, and I was literally loading up the car. Mind you, a two-door BMW that I'd just bought, loading up the BMW every weekend with painting equipment, tools, lawnmowers, whippersnippers, you name it. And I was spending my whole weekend down there, and even some evenings I was down there at the front house renovating it.
Great.
And because I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to things, I think, Dad taught me from a very young age, if you're going to do something, do it properly.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of the things that's been instilled in me from a very young age. And that came about because when I washed the car quickly, and for my $2, if it wasn't done properly, they would say, look, if you're going to go to the trouble of washing our car and you're putting your hand out for money, do it properly. So I only had to do that a couple of times. And it was the same thing with the lawn mowing. You skipped a bit here. So, very much so with painting and things like that, I'm very much a perfectionist. And I thought, if you want something done, do it yourself. And so I did that. And then it took me another year or so afterwards to realise, look, if you just paid a painter to come in,
yeah,
first of all, you would have got your weekends back, but you've just lost 6 months' worth of mortgage payments.
yeah.
So the same money that you've spent on mortgage payments, you could have spent on a painter, had it done 6 months earlier, had a tenant in there, and you could have actually had all of your weekends back.
Yeah, false economy. It's
just
not unusual. Not unusual, mate.
Pat myself gently on the forehead and said, "You're an idiot. What have you done?" So I think that was the last time I'll ever do that. But that was a good lesson in there as well with that whole Seaford project, is understanding, I guess, that the whole planning and strategy was to build 2 townhouses. And then weeks later, I realised, hey, I can probably keep the front house and not have to build a whole nother building.
Yeah.
And then there was also the other lesson in there of, hey, you can pay professionals to do certain work. They do it a lot quicker than you. They probably do a better job than you. And, you get all of your time back. And I think one of the things that people don't do with investing is they value their own time.
Yeah.
And this is one of the big things with renovating. I did another couple of renovations on properties after that and flipped them. And I did another renovation with a friend on a property, and we kept that. But going through the renovation process, a lot of people wrongly assume that, I've gone and bought it for $300,000. We spent $10,000 on it and sold it for $360,000. They think they've made $50,000. But then when you take all your selling costs, your stamp duty costs to get into it, your holding costs, your renovation costs, then you've got
capital gains.
You've got capital gains tax if there's anything left.
Yeah.
But then you've got to factor in, what's your time worth?
Yeah.
How much do you get paid in your job? If you're on $50,000 a year, calculate your hourly rate.
Yeah.
And count all of the hours that you spent going to Bunnings, all of the hours you spent putting petrol in the lawnmower, all of the extra little things that have to be done that aren't even on site. All of the paperwork you've got to get done for getting permits through council, all of these things you've got to put an hourly rate on. And I think there is that false economy with people wrongly assuming they're making lots of money when they're not.
They're
Even
not.
if you make $100,000, then you pay your capital gains tax.
Yeah.
Really, the whole thing can be pointless.
It's a big risk for a very small return, and it's the old story. I mean, you probably say the same thing, but I always say, if you're going to invest, you don't create a second job in the process, because what are you actually achieving? If time is your most important asset, and you're actually loading up your time to do something that then stops you from doing other things, then what are you actually achieving? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people their comment back to that is, but I love property and I'm happy to do it. And that's fine. I love doing that as well. But I also like having a social life.
Yeah.
I'm not the most social person. I'm quite a private person in my own time. But at the same time, there's only so many hours you've got, and there's only so many years that you've got. And this is one of my learnings that I got when I was 30 and I took this little mini retirement, was you're not getting any younger, Luke. And your 20s just goes like that. My teenage years just went in a flash, and then all of a sudden I'm turning 30, and I thought my 20s just gone, just like that, and your 30s just disappeared. And I think the key thing, it sort of hit me at some point, was just saying, look, you can't get this time back. You can always make money, but you can't get the time back.
Yeah. Yeah. So true, mate. So let's talk about the post 30. So that was BC. Let's talk about AD, mate. What happened post 30? You bring all those learnings together. What was different about the 30s?
It did. Well, as I was approaching 30, and thinking that I'm going to die soon because of old age, I thought that during my 20s, I was sort of one of those kids that sort of thought I wanted supercars, I wanted yachts, I wanted fancy houses on the beach that are 6 levels. I want these massive pools. I don't have kids. I don't need that. But I wanted these big houses. I wanted 5-star travel. And a lot of people think that that's what they want.
Yeah.
And I wanted all that by 30. I wanted to retire at 30.
Yeah.
But all of these big dreams weren't really goals.
Yeah.
They were sort of pie in the sky things without any real strategy of getting there.
Yeah.
And it didn't mean anything to me. They're things that I thought I wanted, but that didn't mean anything. I couldn't connect emotionally to that goal.
Yes.
And I think that was a big learning. And so what happened as I started approaching 30, I said, look, I've been doing security for a long time. When I moved to Sydney to get a job, that was so that I could get loans for property.
Yeah.
No other reason, right? I didn't want to do that. But I did it because I thought property is more important than the job.
Yeah.
My approach to going to work every day, well, this is a temporary measure whilst I become a multimillionaire before 30.
Yeah.
That's what I was actually thinking.
Yeah.
Without any roadmap to get there, I just thought that's what's going to happen. And so when I started my business at 25, Monitored Alarms, I really didn't have a long-term view on that. I didn't think I'd be doing it at 35 or 40 or 50. I figured it's a means to an end until I can do some other things in property. Yeah. So I started putting the feelers out there when I was about 29 about selling the business. Eventually went through the process of doing that. I actually had a first-class Qantas ticket to London on my 30th birthday booked. And around the middle of May, the sale that I had for my business fell over.
Ouch.
And I was devastated. And so the sale fell over. It took us a few more months, and we ended up selling it to somebody else. I had to cancel my flight to London, and eventually that whole trip just got cancelled. These things happen, not the end of the world. At the time, I was a bit devastated, but I was getting a chunk of money for selling my business, so I thought, hey, I'm happy to wait for that. So I sold the business, and that's where I really sort of said, look, I've been through a pretty stressful time. Running a business is stressful, no matter how small or big the business is. It's stressful at different levels. Yeah. And so I needed a break, and especially given that the deal fell over, and most of 2010 was stress. For me, I needed an actual break. So I actually went back to Perth for a little while. Okay. Spent some time with family, and explored a few other options. One of the things that I was looking at doing was opening up a grilled burger franchise.
Oh, yeah.
And I went through the process of meeting with Simon Crowe, the founder of Grilled, and had meetings back and forth about that. And I thought that was a good model because it had really started picking up here in Victoria, and they had one store over in WA, and I thought this is a great option to go back to WA for a bit and maybe do that. Yep. After many months of back and forth doing site tests and various other things, going through all my financials, showing them that I had the money to open the franchise. They essentially came back and said no, didn't give me a reason, and then I was out. So they kind of threw me for six a little bit. I thought, oh, that's what I wanted to do. I was really invested in burgers. Oh, well, maybe that's not the way I was supposed to go.
Might have been a blessing in disguise, though, mate.
It absolutely was, and I'm very grateful for them to saying no to me. And I think the key thing is, like maybe I'd done my burger years at 16, but I think for me that was really a good point to say, okay, well, what am I going to do next?
We'll pause part one here before Luke starts to unpack his journey into the formation of his property advisory business, The Property Mentors, and how he can help you on your property journey. So listen out for this in next week's part two of my great chat with Luke Harris, where he takes you through his property approach and unpacks the key components of his new book, Property Fit. Have a great week, and we'll see you then. To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's HELLO@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/Get Invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening. And as always, dream as if you live forever and live as if you die